Good evening. My name is Lisa Trong from Reep Green Solution, and welcome to our webinar, Trust Your Tap. Tonight, you'll be learning about where the Region of Waterloo's water supply comes from and the work that makes our water safe to drink. Let's start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Waterloo region and the Grand River watershed is located on the traditional territory of Indigenous people, including the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. Region of Waterloo and Reep Green Solution is committed to engaging the necessary learning, building the relationships and actions required to work towards reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in our communities. So here's a look at the topic we'll be covering this evening. We'll start with a look at where our water comes from when we sit down with the member of the Region of Waterloo hydrogeology team. Next, we'll speak with the engineers to show you how the Region of Waterloo treats our source water to make it safe to drink. Then we'll be hearing from a representative from the KW Multicultural Center on how we play our part on conserving our water resources. We'll also be speaking with conservation specialists to talk about some of the resources and information available to new residents. Last, we'll take you behind the curtain to show you how our water is treated and where our water goes after it goes down the drain. We'll end the webinar with the question period with all our speakers. Be sure to stay until the end of the webinar for a chance to win one of 3 water efficiency prize packs. And without further ado, let's kick things off with a conversation with Leslie McKee from the Region of Waterloo hydrogeology team.
The Region of Waterloo operates 120 drinking water wells for their water resources, and we also take our water from the Grand River, and we operate an aquifer storage and recovery system. So the region has a hydrogeology and water programs team that helps manage the infrastructure for the wells and also implements programs that help protect the drinking water resources. The hydrogeologists specifically are responsible for managing the well infrastructure, making sure the wells are operating smoothly, and enforcing those policies and programs that are required of us by the government to help keep our drinking water safe. One of the biggest projects that I'm involved in right now is about groundwater exploration. As the region continues to grow, then we need to expand our water supply. We need to expand our groundwater supply, specifically looking for more wells and more places that we can start to take water from. And that is one of the most interesting projects that a hydrogeologist can be involved in. Groundwater exploration is exciting and extremely challenging for tiny logistical reasons as well as practical reasons, like we don't want to put a new well where it may interfere with one of our existing wells or with wells that are being used by private homeowners or farmers. The Region of Waterloo operates a groundwater supply system, a surface water system, and also an aquifer storage and recovery system. That means that we take water from the ground as groundwater, we take water from the Grand River, and we also store some of the Grand River water for use during periods of high demand time. The aquifers and groundwater system in the region could be divided into 2 separate groups, one being the overburden that's primarily here in Kitchener and Waterloo, and the other being bedrock supply that's primarily supplying for Cambridge. And the groundwater supply is replenished by rain and snow that fall on the surface and permeate down into the aquifers. So it's all part of the water cycle here in the Region of Waterloo. In other municipalities, like closer to Toronto or Hamilton, they take their water directly from Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes, and that system is completely different than here in Waterloo. Our groundwater supply could be separated into two separate systems. You could consider Cambridge a system where we are taking water from the bedrock, and we could consider Kitchener-Waterloo a separate system where we're primarily taking water from overburden sources. Those overburden sources are comprised of glaciofluvial sands and gravels that were deposited over 10,000 years ago by the glaciers as they were either here in the region or receding from the region. And even though we're taking the water from units that are up to 100 meters deep, we're still reliant on rain and snow today to replenish those aquifer units for us to take water from. We are currently very busy evaluating all of our existing water supplies. So we're looking at the wells, seeing what they can do. Can we take more? Do we need to take less? And doing a full evaluation of what we currently have, and also going into this groundwater exploration study where we're trying to determine if there are any more supplies that we can utilize here in the region. I like to think that the hydrogeologists are the stewards of the aquifer, so we're the ones making sure that we're taking from it sustainably and keeping it safe for future use.
So now that you know a little bit about the work that the hydrogeology team does to find and assess the current and future water needs, next let's take a look at what happens when our source of water enters the treatment process.
I'm Nicole. I'm a senior engineer at the Region of Waterloo, and I drink tap water.
The engineering and planning team looks at the long-term needs for the community for water and wastewater servicing. It's important for us to have these plans in place so that we have reliable servicing and the funding in place to meet the community needs. A typical day for me as a senior engineer is a lot of collaboration with different people throughout the organization, people in the industry, and we are working together to problem solve and to come up with the best overall approaches, whether it's for a task, a project, or just an overall strategy for the community. Tap water is safe to drink. Water that comes from the tap goes through many treatment steps before it arrives at your home. Treatment for water that comes from the Grand River is more complex. It will go through steps like coagulation, flocculation, settling, ozonation, filtration, and disinfection. Treatment for groundwater supplies is less complex and typically includes filtration and disinfection. Continuous monitoring and routine testing is an important part of ensuring that the water is safe to drink. We use chlorine as a secondary disinfection residual, and what that means is that after the water leaves a treatment facility, we want to ensure that it remains safe to drink while it's traveling through a network of underground pipes to get to your home. It's normal to have a chlorine smell when the water is coming out of the tap, and that just means that the water is remaining safe for you to drink. There are regulations that are in place to ensure that we're using the right amount of chlorine residual so that it's safe for drinking water. An important project that we're working on in engineering and planning to ensure that we are 1 million ready is the water supply strategy update. That project will be looking at the community needs for water supply through to 2051 and identifying recommendations to ensure that we have a safe, reliable, and sustainable water supply for the community. The water supply strategy will be looking at the community water supply needs through to 2051 and ensuring that we have a safe, reliable, and sustainable supply for the community. The pipeline repair was a collaboration of so many people throughout the region and the industry. The concern with the raw water main was identified by an inspection that was completed as part of an ongoing construction project. The contributions from the community and the area municipalities were also a really important part of the success for that repair. By everyone's efforts to reduce their water use, we were able to make sure that we had the water that we needed for the community for our critical needs like drinking water.
Thank you, Nicole, for joining us and talking about the important work to treat our water and maintain our critical water infrastructure. Next, we'll be sitting down with the water programs team to learn more about the water conservation. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Wayne, Water Efficiency Technologist, and I drink tap water. The high-level view of our conservation programs is it's cheaper to use the water that we already have than to find new sources of water. New sources such as the river, the lakes, Great Lakes, or wells. So we have a variety of programs to help conserve water. Programs aimed at the residential sector, the non-residential sector, to control our water use as the population grows and use that water more efficiently. Our intent is to reduce our water usage as a population in the region of Waterloo. We want to ensure that the supplies of water we have last as long as they can as population grows before we have to engage in capital expenditure programs. The rationale is that it's cheaper by about half to use the water supply we have than to find new sources of the Great Lakes, the river, or the ground aquifer wells. So a lot of our programs are structured, be it the residential or the non-residential, are structured to support that efficient use of the water supply that we have collected, and it gets into the reservoirs and then it's distributed. And we can stretch that supply without the need for very large, expensive capital expenditures. So you need to consider the areas in your house that are using abnormally high amounts of water if you have a large water bill. In fact, you should understand your utility bills because sometimes they're combined. For instance, gas and water is combined in the city kitchen. So you should understand your utility bills. The region has a website, regionofwaterloo.ca/conservation, that provides information on our programs and advice to the public on how they can deal with water use in their home and how they can deal with abnormally high water use.
And now we have Anna from Kitchener-Waterloo Multicultural Center to talk about addressing concerns that immigrants and newcomers have on our drinking water.
My name is Ana Martinez. I'm working at the Kitchener-Waterloo Multicultural Center. I am the settlement program manager, and I have been at the center for more than 20 years. what they do is they provide one-on-one services to newcomers, but I will say when we talk about newcomers, the word is not people who just arrive. I will say newcomers and immigrants that go through everybody, because we see people who have been here more than 20 years but still in need of some support. And I came to Canada in '94, original from Guatemala, but I live in Mexico for a number of years. Then when I came here, I was talking about tap water. Was difficult for me and my family to trust the water because of the experience when I was living in Guatemala and in Mexico. The quality of the water is no good. You cannot really drink from the tap water. You need to boil it or buy it bottles of water to making sure that you don't get any issues with health. That's one of the first things. When I came here, I started seeing that people were just drinking water from the tap, and even bringing water in the bottle, or taking that one to work. And took time for us to understand that it was safe to drink it, but I think by reading different materials we were able to see, but also, in the region they have a lot of information about how safe all the treatment that the water goes in before going to your tap, that you can drink it. But then also there are other facts, not only the importance of the health that you can drink the tap water, but also we are talking about as well the problems with climate change that we are facing, and one of the most important pollutants are water bottles, because I just was reading that from 10 bottles, only one maybe will be recycled, if it's recycled. Then we are creating a lot of tons of bottled waters on the sea, on this, and then after that, we in some way or the other will have this plastic in our bodies. We talk about finances as well. It's expensive to buy bottled water, and tap water is already there. I was just checking about how expensive it is, and sometimes you can spend 500, 1,000% more by buying water bottle than just getting your water for wherever you are, at your office or at your house. And every place I think is safe to drink water. And it's so easy now. There is a lot of containers that you can buy it, and it's cheaper just to refill it, take wherever you go. I think that's important that we use tap water for different uses, let's say finances, for your health, and for the health of the environment. That what for me is also important is what we are leaving to our children and their children. I mean, the generation that are coming. What is the planet that we are encouraged to do this for the future as well.
Before we get into the Q&A, we like to take you on a tour of the water and wastewater treatment plants. In this segment, you'll get to take a look behind this curtain to see how our water is treated before and after use. And remember, if you have any questions for our experts, be sure to put them in the Q&A or the chat before the end of the tour.
How many times a day do you turn on the tap? Here in Waterloo Region, we get clean water delivered when we need it. Have you ever wondered how that water gets to you? Today, we're going to look at what goes on inside the region's only surface water treatment facility, the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant. But first, let's cover some basic information about our water supply system. In Waterloo Region, some people get water from their own private groundwater wells, but most of us use water supplied from the municipal government. The Region of Waterloo is responsible for supplying clean, safe drinking water for people in the cities of Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo, and the townships of North Dumfries, Wellesley, Wilmot, and Woolwich. On average, our community needs about 250 million liters of water every day. That's like 5,000 backyard swimming pools. The region operates over 100 different wells that draw water up from underground aquifers. But today, we're talking about the other 20% that comes from the Grand River, the main waterway that winds through our region. That surface water is what is treated at Mannheim. How do we turn that river water into clean, clear drinking water? Treating surface or river water requires many steps to be sure it's clean and safe when it arrives at your home. That happens at the Region of Waterloo Mannheim Water Treatment Plant on Ottawa Street in Kitchener. This facility was commissioned in 1992. The region's Water Services Division operates this treatment plant. Over 50 people work here. The staff members operating this plant are certified water treatment operators. They are highly trained and must always be updating their knowledge of treatment technologies and water safety regulations. The Mannheim plant can treat up to 840 liters of clean water every second, but normally operates between 400 and 600 liters per second. That's 40 or 50 million liters of clean water every day. Before we go inside to see how it all happens, let's jump back to the Grand River. We collect drinking water from the Grand River in the Hidden Valley area near the Highway 8 bridge between Kitchener and Cambridge. You've probably driven past it. A weir diverts water from the river into what's called a low lift, which is a building beside the river with screens to keep large debris and branches out, and pumps that send the water uphill to 4 huge concrete storage cells or tanks. This reservoir can hold 142,000 cubic meters, or about 2,800 backyard swimming pools. That's enough water to keep the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant running for 2 to 4 days. Why do we store the water in this reservoir before it's treated? First, it gives time for sand and dirt to settle out of the water. Also, the reservoir builds in a safety delay. If we learn of a contamination in the river, say a chemical spill from an accident, we have several days of water stored there for use while the river is cleaned up. Treating river water takes more work and energy than treating the groundwater from our wells, since it is exposed to human and animal activity, plus the effects of weather. Surface water has microorganisms like bacteria and viruses that can make people sick. These microorganisms aren't usually found in groundwater. We have to remove 99.99% or more of these harmful organisms for the water to be safe to drink. Water conditions in the river also change throughout the year, thanks to rain or snow, temperature changes, and possibly contamination from upriver. To get this water ready for you to drink, a pump moves that water through a large underground pipe 10 kilometers uphill from here at the Grand River to the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant. Once it reaches the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant, the water is stored in these raw water tanks before we start the treatment process. Each tank can hold 2,000 cubic meters and can supply the plant with about 60 minutes of water. The Mannheim plant is one of the highest elevation points in the region. That means we can use gravity instead of generated energy to help water flow through the treatment plant and back out to the community. Using less energy reduces costs and greenhouse gases associated with climate change. But first, we need to complete many steps before the water is safe to drink. This series of different steps is called the treatment process. Let's go inside and see how it's done. Step 1 is actually 2 cleaning processes at once: coagulation and flocculation. It happens here. We add chemicals called coagulants to the water. This makes the tiny particles in the water stick together. These can be sand, dirt, or algae. We also add a polymer that attaches to these solid chunks and makes them heavy so we can easily separate and remove them. In the flocculation stage, if you look closely, you might be able to see the large, slowly spinning wheel with spokes at the bottom of the tank. The spinning wheels help mix the polymer with the water. The dirt in the water is attracted to the polymer and forms large white clumps called flocks. Now it's time to get rid of those flocks or large clumps of dirt. This is the next step of the treatment process. It's called sedimentation. This happens in a tank inside the treatment plant that's 8 meters deep. Our goal here is to remove the flocks that we created earlier. We use something called a plate settler, which is an angled piece of metal to help the solids settle down to the bottom of the tank. Water flows through the plate settler from the bottom up, and the plate provides a big surface area that the solids can fall onto. Once the flock is heavy enough, it slides down the plate and settles at the bottom. This settled sludge is pumped outside where it's dried and treated. Back to the water inside. The next step is ozonation. We put ozone gas into the water, which helps disinfect it by deactivating bacteria, viruses, and also breaking down any inorganic material. Ozonation also improves the taste, smell, and color of the river water. We create this ozone ourselves at the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant from liquid oxygen. After it's done its job in the water, ozone molecules change back to normal oxygen. From here, the water moves into the filtration step. We filter the water through both sand and grains of active carbon to remove any remaining silt, viruses, bacteria, or other impurities. These things would make the water cloudy, and nice clear water is important for the next step. That next step is disinfection using ultraviolet radiation. The water flows through a large pipe with special lamps that shine ultraviolet or UV rays through the clear water. This instantly deactivates all sorts of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, and other microorganisms that can make people sick. The UV light doesn't kill these pathogens, but it deactivates their DNA and RNA so they can't reproduce or grow. The water treatment process is almost finished. It's time for chlorination, the final step in water's journey through the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant. Chlorine has been used to treat water for over a century. We store chlorine gas in these large cylindrical tanks. We add a small amount to the water to disinfect it for viruses and bacteria. Chlorine doesn't kill every type of microorganism, which is why we also need the UV radiation from the previous step. And unlike UV radiation, a bit of residual chlorine stays in the water. Having some chlorine in the water is important, so the water is protected against any new contamination in the pipes as it travels to your home. The chlorine disappears from water over time, so the Region of Waterloo monitors chlorine levels to make sure they stay in the right range as water moves through our distribution system. Each of these processes on their own is not enough to properly clean our water to meet drinking water standards, but together they remove all the tiny particles and microorganisms that could make water taste bad or make you sick. Everything happening in the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant is carefully monitored 24 hours a day from a high-tech control room. Staff can track what's happening throughout the plant and start or stop the system. Also, the Mannheim plant is built with full redundancy, which means we have 2 separate versions of every step of the treatment process. If any process is shut down, the other side of the plant can keep operating. The time it takes for water to go through all 6 of these processes depends on how much water is flowing through the plant. But on an average day, it takes about 8 hours from the time the water enters the treatment plant until it leaves as clean drinking water. Now the water is ready to go out to homes and businesses across the region. How do we deliver it? The Mannheim Water Treatment Plant has a booster pump to help push that water out into the pipes, also called water mains, that make up our distribution system. We have about 265 kilometers of trunk mains, which are the biggest underground pipes that carry large amounts of water across the region. We also have a complex system of reservoirs, including 11 elevated water storage tanks and towers, and pumping stations to deliver the clean drinking water that comes from the Mannheim plant, and from all the groundwater wells we talked about earlier. Clean water is so important to the health of every community. Ontario has a Safe Drinking Water Act, which sets the legal safety standards for municipalities like ours. These rules are strict and require regular testing, but the Region of Waterloo goes above and beyond what the Act requires. We test more often than we need for 150 different water quality parameters, checking the levels of things like bacteria, nitrates, and iron. We check both the source water before it enters our system and, of course, the clean water that is heading out to homes and businesses. Every year, we conduct over 50,000 tests. Some of that happens on site at the Mannheim Water Treatment Plant. Other tests are done by an accredited laboratory and licensed by the Government of Ontario. And that's how water travels from the Grand River to your tap. Enjoy your next glass of clean, clear drinking water. And remember, there's a team of professionals working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to make sure there's enough safe water for everyone in Waterloo Region. For more information about the Region of Waterloo water system, visit www.regionofwaterloo.ca/water. Every day, we use water to flush toilets, take showers, brush our teeth, clean our clothes, and wash the dishes. The water we use, along with anything else that goes down the drain like shampoo, soap, laundry detergent, pee, poop, and toilet paper, is wastewater. Where it goes depends on where you live. If your home is in the country, you might have a septic system. The wastewater leaves your home through an underground pipe that drains into a tank buried in your backyard. Over time, the water filters out of the tank and back into the ground. It is important to have a licensed contractor clean out and inspect the tank every 3 to 5 years. If you live in a city or town, the local municipal government usually manages the wastewater after it leaves your property. In Waterloo Region, the wastewater leaves your home through a drain and enters a network of underground sewer pipes that go to one of the 13 wastewater treatment plants the Region of Waterloo operates. At each plant, the wastewater goes through a complex, multi-step treatment process. After treatment, the liquids return to the Grand River watershed, and the solids become biosolids to fertilize farmers' fields or help restore contaminated ponds near old mines. Let's visit the Kitchener Wastewater Treatment Plant to learn how it happens. The Kitchener Wastewater Treatment Plant, located on Mill Park Drive in Kitchener, is the largest wastewater facility in Waterloo Region. Built in 2 phases starting in the early 1960s, the Kitchener plant has completed many upgrades, improving the quality of water returning to the Grand River. When the wastewater arrives at the plant, the process begins with screening and grit removal. The wastewater passes through a screen to remove larger items, including wipes, plastic bottles, and twigs. The items removed during this screening step then pass through the washer compactor in preparation for disposal. The flow then passes through a grit separator to remove smaller materials like sand and pebbles. The larger items, as well as the sand and pebbles removed during the screening steps, go to the landfill for disposal. The first 2 steps play an important role protecting downstream equipment from damage and reducing the risk of clogged pipes. Now for an important message from one of our wastewater professionals.
Pee, poo, and toilet paper. That's all that should go down your toilet. What shouldn't go down? Glad you asked. These items don't break down when flushed down the toilet or poured down the drain, and this can lead to blocked pipes or damaged equipment. At your home, this can cause sewage to back up into your basement. For the wastewater system, this can lead to blocked sewer pipes, damaged equipment, and costly unnecessary maintenance at the wastewater treatment plant. And now back to the tour.
The next step after screening and grit removal is the primary clarifiers. Here, the wastewater passes through 4 tanks, allowing time for the solids and liquids to separate. The liquids remain at the top, while the solids sink to the bottom of the tank. After this step, the liquids and solids take different journeys to complete treatment. Let's first talk about the treatment for liquids. The next step for liquids is aeration, the most important step of the treatment process. We pump the liquid sewage from the primary clarifier tank to the aeration tank. Even though we have separated the solids from the liquids, there is still a lot of organic matter to remove. To do this, we use bugs. Oxygen added into the tank provides the right conditions for tiny, microscopic bugs to eat the organic matter. Phosphorus is also removed during this process by adding chemicals to the sewage. Next, we use secondary clarifiers to remove the bugs from the water. The water enters at the center of the circular tanks and flows outwards, causing the bugs and any remaining organic matter to sink to the bottom. Some bugs return to the aeration tanks to maintain the bug population. We pump the remaining solid matter to the digesters for treatment. More on that later. The clean water on top continues to the final treatment process, tertiary filtration and UV disinfection. Here, we filter and disinfect the treated liquids before discharging it back into the Grand River. At the Kitchener wastewater treatment plant, cloth disc filters capture any remaining fine particles and remove phosphorus to prevent algae outbreaks in the river. The final step for the fluids is disinfection. At the Kitchener plant, we use ultraviolet or UV radiation to disinfect the water. This inactivates the bacteria or E. coli that may remain during the treatment process. The clean water can now return to the Grand River to continue its journey through the water cycle. What about the solids? After the solids leave the primary clarifiers, they enter the digesters. We pump the solids into digesters, where another group of tiny microscopic bugs get to work. These bugs do not like oxygen, so instead we force all the air out of the tanks. While the bugs are eating the organic matter, they produce methane and carbon dioxide, two harmful greenhouse gases. The Kitchener plant uses technology to capture and convert the gases to produce green energy. This renewable energy helps to operate and heat the plant. The solids are now a soupy mixture we call sludge. At this point, transporting the sludge to its final destination would require many trucks. Instead, we pump the sludge through a pipe to a dewatering plant on Manitou Drive in Kitchener. When the sludge arrives at the plant, it is temporarily stored in a holding tank. The tank can hold approximately 1 million liters of sludge and is emptied daily during the weekdays. After the sludge leaves the tank, it is pumped through pipes to a centrifuge for dewatering. The centrifuge uses gravity and the force of speed to push the water out of the solids. Think of it like a really big salad spinner. Prior to the sludge entering the centrifuge, a polymer is added to speed up the dewatering process. The excess water leaves the centrifuge and returns to the Kitchener wastewater treatment plant through a pipe to rejoin the treatment process before returning to the Grand River. The sludge is now a dark, wet, soil-like solid we call biosolids. On average, 73 tons of biosolids are taken off-site each day. The biosolids are now ready to use as a product. This is only possible by following strict treatment and testing to meet provincial regulations. An auger system moves the biosolids from the centrifuge area to one of the 3 hopper bins. The hopper bins provide temporary storage of the biosolids until ready for loading onto a transport truck. When the truck arrives, it enters the loading area and stops, so the truck bed is underneath the 4 discharge chutes to be filled with treated biosolids. The auger system pushes the biosolids from each hopper bin and into the truck bed. Loading starts with the chute at the back of the truck and slowly closes each chute until reaching the front of the truck bed. After the truck is loaded, we transport the treated biosolids to provincially approved farms to fertilize fields, or to closed mines to return tailing ponds to a naturalized environment. Our wastewater treatment plants must meet strict environmental quality standards set by the provincial government. Throughout the treatment process, we test samples and monitor the process to make sure our facilities meet the standards and regulations to reduce harm to the natural environment. And now you know where the water in your sinks, showers, and toilets go. Learn more at regionofwaterloo.ca/wastewater.
Thank you for joining us and learning about where our water supply comes from and the work that we do to ensure that the water is safe, sustainable, and future ready. For more information,
On water, please visit the regionalwaterloo.ca/water or get in touch with our water programs team at watercycle@regionalwaterloo.ca. On behalf of the Region of Waterloo and Reep Green Solution, we thank you for joining us this evening. Bye for now. Hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the webinar so far. So now let's get into the exciting part and meeting our water programs team from the Region of Waterloo. So here with us tonight, we have Tyler, Nicole, and Wayne. Now that you've met our panelists, we're eager to hear from you now. So we'll be opening the floor with a Q&A session. So if you haven't put down your questions, feel free to add them in the Q&A or in the chat. And without further ado, let's dive into your questions. So before the first one, maybe to Nicole, how do you know if you're getting water from the ground or from the Grand River?
Well, our drinking water is actually a mix of groundwater and surface water from the Grand River. Approximately 80% of the region's water comes from groundwater and 20% comes from surface water. So it's throughout the region, it's a blend of both surface and groundwater.
Thank you, Nicole. A question from Tina. Is there a better way to fill my pool in the spring than using tap?
I will answer that question. Firstly, it's best not to pump the pool down too much and have to refill it a lot because you will have winter precipitation, keeping the water level up. Now, there's many approaches to how to prevent needing too much water in the spring. Some people use a cover for the pool that lets the water through. It's called a safety cover, but it sits horizontal on the pool so the rainwater and the snow can go through. Some people with a soft cover put the dirty water back in the pool and use chemicals to bring the water back up to swimmability. There's a number of different ways to approach not pumping your water down too far and having to backfill it. If you do have to fill it up, you are stuck with using tap water. You can get a tanker, a truck of water. There are water services around town that will, at a cost, will bring a large volume of water to fill your pool. People do that when they've drained the pool for service work, like repainting the pool, etc. But if you have a large volume you have to replenish in the spring, you need to either pay for it from your tap or pay for it from a tanker delivery, or try and reduce the amount you have to backfill with your practices of fall shutdown and spring opening.
Great, thank you, Wayne. Another question, maybe to Tyler. Where can I find more information on my water bills?
Thanks, Lisa. So as you saw in the video, I think Wayne talked about this one. The most important part of water conservation is understanding how much water you use. So the first step that you should take is take a look at your water bill. And we do have resources on our website that you can find to find out how much water you're using, what to look for on your water bill. You'll just go to regionofwaterloo.ca/water review, and then we'll have a sample bill from each of our 7 municipalities that you can take a look at and compare yours to. So again, that's regionofwaterloo.ca/water review. I'll make sure I type that in the chat for everyone so you can copy and paste it and bookmark it if you'd like to.
Thank you. Another question, does water hardness affect my drinking water?
Do you want me to answer that, folks? Sure. Affect my drinking water. Hardness is not a contaminant. Hardness is an aesthetic with no health implications. It's mineralized water. Our water supply, because most comes from the ground, is what we call highly mineralized. Some minerals in your water is just fine for you. So And in the Ontario drinking water standards, there's no standard for hardness. There's an advisory, but there's no standard because, again, it's not a health issue. It's not a contaminant.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last question from Barry, are our water, are our waste treatment facilities capable of removing chemicals like artificial sweeteners, medication, or other tougher or filtered chemicals?
I'm ex-laboratory, our regional laboratory, so I can answer this. In testing water, we have inorganics, organics, and microbiology, bugs. We've all heard of the inorganics. There's things like salt, sodium, chloride, nitrates, all these sort of things. But on the organic side, there are hundreds of different chemicals. And we do scan for some of the ones that these are the sort of things that should not be there at all. There is no safe limit. They should be basically not present or in minute amounts. So pharmaceuticals is one where it should not be in the water, but we do not test regularly for them. But we do scans that are sent to third-party accredited laboratories to scan for hundreds of organic chemicals. And as I say, they should be not ND, which is not detectable.
Thank you, Wayne. Another question, how many microplastics, are there any concerns regarding microplastics in our water supply? Great question.
I guess being from the laboratory, no, we don't test for microplastics. Microplastics are a global problem because of our consumer society, but we're not testing. I mean, microplastics, I mentioned inorganics, organics, and microbiology. There's no microplastics are, gosh, they would be, I guess, microscope checking. I mean, that's something that we're not testing for. I think what we're trying to do is tackle it from the waste management side of things and packaging, and as a society, use less packaging, plastics, and that sort of thing. But there is no now the university, any testing like that, some of the pharmaceuticals, the COVID testing after COVID, the microplastics, these are the sort of things that are the realm of research laboratory in at the universities, but they're not part of regular municipal water testing.
Thank you, Wayne. A question for Tyler. Do you recommend that we filter drinking water at the tap? If so, what are the recommendations on filtration?
You probably heard some of our panelists from the recording tonight say that they drink tap water, and that's because, you know, that's exactly what it is. You can drink water straight from the tap. You don't have to filter it. Filtering it is more of a preference. So we hear a lot of people say that, you know, they don't like the taste of our water, or, you know, they're tasting chlorine, that type of thing. So if you prefer less of a taste, a lot of people choose to filter, but it's not a requirement, and it's not something that we would recommend just because the water is safe to drink straight from the tap.
Thank you, Tyler. And our last question from Rolf to Nicole. How does the program work that the region is offering that converts your water softener to treat only the hot water?
So how the program works is it requires a resident to switch their plumbing to soften hot water only. They can use, or you can use a plumbing company, or you can do the plumbing changes yourself. In order to qualify for the rebate, you would need to submit an itemized receipt that states that the plumbing was changed to soften hot water only, as well as water hardness results that show that only the hot water is softened. And you can submit all of that information or other questions that you might have to our water cycle at regionofwaterloo.ca email address, and the rebate is $50 for any plumbing changes made.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you everyone for all your questions. So we hope you've learned a lot about our drinking water supply. As we wrap up, we like to remind you to please fill out our survey. The link is going to be in the chat for a chance for you to win one of our water efficiency prize packs. Your feedback is important to us. So thank you once again for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Bye for now.